I had always wanted to be a missionary from as long as I can remember. Even as a child, my only ambition was to go to a foreign country to tell people about the gospel. But I didn't know where the Lord wanted me to serve until college, where I met this pretty little missionary girl from Mexico. When I eventually visited Mexico for the first time in 1984, that was when I knew where God would have me to serve. That first visit was amazing, but it was also frustrating because I didn't speak any Spanish. I still had to finish college, so I enrolled in Spanish classes to get a head start on the language. I excelled in my classes, aced the exams, and felt pretty confident about my skills when I went back to Mexico the following summer as an intern. My confidence quickly evaporated when I got there and realized I still didn't understand what anyone was saying because they spoke way too fast for me. I tried to pick up bits and pieces here and there, but by the time I got the gist of the conversation and figured out something to say, it was always too late and they had already changed the subject. I memorized phrases that I could interject but usually blurted them out at the wrong time. I invented some ways to remember basic phrases. For example, if I wanted something, I would envision a key floating in the air and the words yo, key, air, oh, and say yo quiero. If I wanted to apologize, I would imagine stepping on someone's foot and looking down with the words lo siento, and remember, lo siento. Silly mental tricks, but they actually helped me learn. I was determined to not only learn enough to get by, but poco a poco master Spanish once and for all. That summer internship was incredible. Though I didn't master Spanish in those few months, I did learn enough to be able to talk to my new friends on the ranch, at church, and in town. I was always studying my vocab flashcards and jotting down new phrases and expressions like cubole, no hombre, orale, aguas, chamfle, chido, chafa, gacho, gavacho, guacalajole, no manches, a la torre, and so many more. When Dawn and I were finally married and living on the ranch in Cadereyta, I was able to focus on my study of the language, though it was influenced by rural rancho culture. I picked up some expressions that I later learned were not quite appropriate in more refined cultured settings, like talking with doctors, lawyers, and politicians, like saying, "Que onda?" to the mayor. Eventually, I learned to differentiate and use the right phrases in the right context. I remember the very first time I went into town all by myself to pick up some things. I went to the hardware store and had to ask for cement and some other building supplies. I needed a new toothbrush as well, so I went to the pharmacy and had to ask for that. I was nervous and self-conscious, but people were very gracious and helpful. Relieved my first mission was successfully accomplished, I looked forward to the next trip into town. Though I did talk with my wife and in-laws in English, living in Mexico was otherwise a total immersion experience for me, in town, at church, and everywhere else. The best language training I could have asked for was provided by my students at Maranatha Bible Institute, where I started teaching upon my arrival on the field, in spite of my lack of fluency. I would translate my notes the night before teaching my classes, then basically just read my notes to my students. Not much interaction at first, but gradually as they corrected my Spanish, helped me, and asked me questions about the material, and I helped them, I was able to learn to speak Spanish almost fluently within about a year. As a Bible teacher and preacher, I had to learn lots of theological and doctrinal terms. When we started coordinating medical and surgical brigades with doctors and nurses from the US, I had to learn to translate Spanish to English and English to Spanish between doctors and patients. This meant I had to learn even more medical terminology to describe symptoms, diagnoses, and treatments. Likewise, as a music teacher, musical terms had to be learned. When we moved from northern Mexico to Guadalajara, I had to learn some new vocabulary and list of local idioms. Tomate became jitomate, plomero became fontanero, tacos de trompo became tacos de adobada, and many more. Having now lived most of my life in Mexico, Spanish has become as natural to me as English, and there are even things such as preaching that I find easier and more comfortable in Spanish. That is not to say that I have mastered Spanish by any means. I am still learning every day. I am always discovering new words and phrases and idioms that I didn't know before. All I have to do is try to read some Spanish or Mexican literature to remind myself how much I don't know about the Spanish language. Maybe I did just learn enough to get by after all. Anyway, I am not a linguist or a scholar. I am a missionary. So I will continue to study and practice conversing as capably as I can and communicate God's truth in Spanish as effectively as I am able, as long as the good Lord gives me breath. Thank you so much for listening to this true story from Memoirs of Mexico. If you enjoyed this story, or if it was a blessing to you, please feel free to like and subscribe to my channel. That would be a blessing to me. I upload a new true story every day. If you like to read, you can also order Memoirs of Mexico in paperback or ebook on Amazon.com. There's a link in the description. Thanks again for listening.